show, Repair. I am your host, Jessica Aldridge, and it is my honor to welcome our guests, Liv Butler, Policy Associate for Californians Against Waste, and Elizabeth Chamberlain, Director of Sustainability for iFixit. Welcome to EcoJustice Radio. Welcome you both to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting topic. We've covered it before on EcoJustice Radio prior to having legislation passed in the state of California. And there's so much that's happened across the country, across the world, things that manufacturers are doing that, since the last time we spoke, things that we need to remind our listeners about. But there's been some really great changes that have happened in the area of right to repair, things that the consumers are now going to be able to do, have the right to fix their own devices. And we're going to jump into that. And we're also going to talk about what some of these big manufacturers are still doing, like Apple. But first, before we do that, Liz, I think it's important for us to define what is meant by right to repair. Can you define it for us?
Yeah. So right to repair is the idea that you should be able to fix everything you own. That means you should be able to take your stuff to a repair shop of your choice, or if you want, you should be able to fix it yourself. And manufacturers shouldn't be able to limit your access to the materials that you need to fix your things.
Clearly and succinctly expressed. Thank you for that. And this is a question for both of you. To me, it sounds like right to repair is a no-brainer, something that we all should be able to do to extend the life of our electronics, plus to save all this precious resources and the impacts, the environmental and social justice impacts of them, right? What has been the opposition of right to repair legislation, and what manufacturers, I mentioned Apple earlier, what manufacturers have been the biggest opponents? And maybe we'll start, Elizabeth, with you, and then we get your take, Liv.
Yeah, so repair is pretty lucrative, both because when manufacturers have a monopoly, they can charge whatever prices they want, and they can upsell you, they can push you to upgrade instead of repairing if they want. And so in every industry where we've fought for right to repair, we see manufacturers trying to hold on to these repair monopolies and keep you coming back to their stores. So in electronics, it's Apple, absolutely. It's all the major manufacturers, all the major electronics lobbying groups. In farm equipment, it's John Deere, it's Case New Holland. In medical devices, it's groups like Steris. So really anywhere that manufacturers have a monopoly on repair, which is in a surprising range of product categories, they try to hold on to those monopolies.
And Liv.
Yeah, Liz put it pretty succinctly, pretty well. Mostly industry. Industry is the one working both up front. You see them around the Capitol and behind the scenes to make sure that they can hold on to those repair monopolies. They don't want people fixing their own stuff because it is, lucrative, as well as they tend to say that there are privacy concerns, that people will be able to, see your data, or, there are trade secrets that they are worried about being exposed by third-party repair technicians. But a lot of those people are people who are either previously trained by them and then go work at an independent shop, or are not, interested in selling that data or knowing or exposing it, or even have access to it. So those are opponents and their concerns.
In relation to right to repair, I want to introduce the significance of your two organizations. We'll start with you, Elizabeth. You are the director of iFixit. The sustainability director for iFixit. What has iFixit done to supersede the oppositional roadblocks that disallow people from fixing their own devices?
Yeah, so we've been pushing for more repairable stuff for 20 years. We started in 2003 when our co-founder dropped a laptop off his dorm room bed. He broke the power plug. He had a soldering iron and he wanted to fix it, but he couldn't find any instructions. And so he and his dorm mate were pretty handy people. They took it apart themselves, they figured it out, and they took pictures as they did it, and they put those pictures with instructions online. And they immediately got interest from other people who'd had the same problem, who'd wanted to fix Apple stuff but couldn't do it. They had, I think, 30,000 views in the first weekend that they put that stuff online. So from there, we became Apple's missing repair manual. We wrote guides for everything Apple has made. We started selling parts, and we expanded to a bunch of other products, a bunch of other kinds of things. And today we've got about 100,000 step-by-step repair guides for how to fix everything from toasters to tractors. And we push for more repairable stuff from a bunch of angles. So we're working on right to repair legislation around the world. And in the last few years, we actually had manufacturers start to come to us and ask for help getting repair guides and parts and tools and documentation to people. So we are the official DIY repair partner for Google Pixel and Samsung Galaxy phones.
And Liv, before you jump in, because I want to know about Californians Against Waste, I just want to mention to our listeners that we're talking about a lot. You know, your biggest interest probably is going to be that consumer electronics, but I know, Liz, you keep talking about like a tractor or John Deere, and so I just want to tell the listeners, like, keep listening, because the fact that we can't even fix our own agricultural equipment also has a negative impact on us as consumers as well. And so just want to put that little earwig out there for everyone that's listening, that we're going to really dive into that in addition. So Liv, you're the policy associate for Californians Against Waste. What is the role as a nonprofit for Californians Against Waste for right to repair legislation?
Yeah, we're 1/3 of the co-sponsor coalition, and as an advocacy organization, we focus on statewide policy, but we're located and do a lot of our work in Sacramento. So much of right to repair for us is helping with the language of the bill and advocating for it in the Capitol community with our state senators and assembly members. And yeah, it's a team effort. So we also work to build out support with our co-sponsor groups, iFixit and CalPERG.
And you do amazing work at the Capitol. So I greatly appreciate what y'all are doing, and the fact that we have this piece of legislation that recently passed. So this question, before we get into that legislation, so that people really understand the bigger picture of the importance of right to repair, this question's for both of you. Why is right to repair so important across the board, from climate issues and pushing back on planned obsolescence to supporting accessibility for everyone, and also for supporting small businesses? And Liv, let's start with you. Why is right to repair so incredibly important? And in addition, if you mentioned planned obsolescence, can you please define that for us?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot here. So starting with planned obsolescence, that's a tactic that manufacturers use when they're designing their products, especially when it comes to our personal tech, where our devices really aren't built to last. Companies give our devices a sort of lifespan that's really impractical for the average consumer based on how much they've invested in that device. So it maximizes profits for the manufacturer as well, because you're invested in this churn of getting a new phone every 2 to 3 years because you know your battery is not going to hold a charge, or you know that when your camera is not working or your screen is cracked, it's just not really an option to repair it. So it creates kind of this fast tech and this notion that we don't have ownership over our own devices. And so, I mean, it hurts consumers and the environment because, as we all know, the cost of a new phone or a new device really ranges from hundreds to thousands of dollars. And it also creates literal tons of e-waste that pollutes our environment. I think right to repair also touches on the digital divide. And that's the notion that the amount that we have to interact on a day-to-day basis with our technology isn't equitable for everyone. So giving people more options to repair their devices makes repair cost effective. CalPERG is one of SB 244's sponsors, and they estimate that ensuring the right to repair can save just Californians $5.1 billion a year. So that means, not constantly having to upgrade or take your phone exclusively to Apple or to, the authorized repair technician, which is a very small pool of repair technicians. If you have water damage, if you crack your screen, if you have a camera issue, all these are easy fixes, and you should be able to fix them at a cost that works for you and in a way that's equitable for more people. And then I guess the third thing I wanted to touch on is the environmental impact of our e-waste and how SB 244 minimizes that a little bit more. And that's kind of what brings Californians Against Waste to the table in the right to repair conversation. So as I mentioned before, we work a lot on end-of-life product management, waste management legislation, recycling, composting, things like that. And so e-waste is a huge contributor to our waste stream. And it's one of, if not the fastest growing waste streams that we have. I think we're up there with like fast fashion, e-waste are all competing for the #1 spot and contributing to our waste stream. So while we have e-waste recycling here in California, the best way to manage a product that can be harmful at the end of its life is to source reduce. So that can look like producing less or extending the life of the thing that you already own. And then that kind of brings me to the second part of the e-waste and the climate impact of our technology, of our products with a lithium ion battery. There's a lot of energy that's required to mine the materials that go into that battery. There's a lot of water that is used when people are mining lithium, cobalt, materials like that, that are in all of our devices. And all of that adds up. And another statistic from one of our co-sponsors, CalPERG, is that 86% of your smartphone's climate impact comes from the manufacturing process. So this all adds up both on the front and the back end. And that's kind of what brings Californians Against Waste to the table here.
I was just making a note. It was 86% of your climate impact comes from the manufacturing of your device.
Yeah. Manufacturing, the mining, the assembly, the transportation, it's super carbon intensive.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And I think because, and for some of our listeners know that I'm also in the waste industry for my day job. And I think as consumers, we're so used to seeing the downstream, because that's what we see. We're not on the, most of us, we're not on the front lines. We're not in the area where they're mining material. So we don't see the impact in what we call in the upstream. We see the impact at the downstream. We see the product that's in front of us. And we say to ourselves, well, I'm told that I'm supposed to get rid of this product in a specific way. And then some of us know how, some don't, right? And so we see the physical impact in front of us, but we don't really consider what happened before we actually got the product. Elizabeth, what would you like to add to this conversation in regards to the importance of right to repair?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is how important this is for small businesses and competition between small businesses and manufacturers. iFixit sells wholesale to independent repair shops, so we hear a lot about the troubles that they're having fixing things, and they really have been struggling with getting the parts, tools, and documentation that they need, and they're struggling to compete with manufacturers. We surveyed independent repair shops with CalPERG in California last year, and over half of them, 59%, said that if right to repair doesn't pass, they might have to close their doors because of a lack of access to repair materials.
Well, that's awful. So being able to create this competitive arena for small repair, for small businesses to exist, right? And also to come into existence, I'm assuming as well, because with new legislation, which we're going to talk about here in a second, next question for you is, new legislation has been passed. So in passing this new legislation, we don't only, hopefully, I'm hoping, knock on wood, are not only supporting the fact that we are able to repair our material, but that hopefully this will create more jobs, create more business to be able to come to California and for that to also be able to expand across the United States. And even, Europe has their own right to repair legislation. And I know that there's right to repair legislation that's happening across the state. So I want to say to our speakers too, this isn't just about California, but what's happening in California, it's also happening in places like Colorado and New York and other places. We're going to speak to that, but also whatever happens in California is going to spread and allow other states to be able to step up and be able to allow people the same right to their electronics as Californians now have or will have in January. So recently, California State Governor Newsom signed off on that right to repair bill that I keep speaking to. It's Senate Bill 244 that forces manufacturers to provide the tools, the parts, and the documentation to support the repair of their equipment And I want to dive into this. Liv, what is required under this piece of legislation, and who were the major co-signatories on this win?
Yeah, so SB 244 by Senator Susan Eggman requires the manufacturers of devices, tech devices, and large household appliances to make the parts, tools, and guides available to consumers and individual repair shops. That makes it so people can fix their stuff without having to either replace it or upgrade it, or have the manufacturer as their only repair option. Our co-sponsor group was 3 organizations: CalPERG, which is California Public Interest Research Group. They have a national presence as well and state-to-state presence. Californians Against Waste and iFixit, and each group kind of touches on a different part of the issue. So CalPERG comes at it primarily from a consumer protection standpoint. Californians Against Waste is looking at it from a climate and waste management perspective, and iFixit brings that kind of know-how, design, repair, and technical components, and Liz can speak more to that. And it's also important to note that Senator Eggman and her staff have worked really diligently on this for 5 years now, so it's great to see all that hard work pay off.
Elizabeth, the timeline, is there anything that you want to add in regards to what we can expect?
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things about the California bill, and that that really makes it different from the bills that have already passed in New York and Minnesota, is that it has a timeline for continued availability of materials for people. So products that cost between $50 and $99, materials have to be available for 3 years after they're manufactured. And for products over $100, materials have to be available for 7 years. So that really ensures that, for a long time, you will continue to have access to the repair materials you need.
And can you remind us of the start date on this? That when people are like, is this supposed to be happening now, or how far in the future is this plan to start taking place?
Yeah, the bill becomes effective July 1st, 2024, and it applies to products that were manufactured and sold in California after July 1st, 2021. So it looks back retroactively 3 years.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to take a quick break, so everyone stay tuned. We're going to talk, this doesn't apply to all devices. And so we're going to talk about what it does apply to. We'll talk about, what manufacturers are pushing back? Why are they pushing back? What have they done? And, I'm a little apprehensive. I'm wondering if some of these big manufacturers of our cell phones are going to try to finagle their way around this bill. And is there any transparency in making sure that they actually do what they said they're supposed to do? So everyone stay tuned and we'll be right back. Fantastic. We are back to talk about right to repair. We were just speaking to this piece of legislation that passed in the state of California, which is Senate Bill 244, which I think is going to have major implications across the United States in the way that we're able to literally repair our devices and save resources. But it doesn't apply to all devices, to all electronics. Liv, what kind of devices does this legislation apply to, and what does it not include when it comes to right to repair?
So with California's new law, you have the right to repair your tech devices like your phone, your tablet, your computer, as well as large household appliances like a dishwasher. But it doesn't include farm or agricultural equipment or construction equipment, so big, heavy-duty stuff. You also can't repair medical devices, alarm systems, or game consoles under this law.
Such an odd one. Why game consoles?
I am not sure. Liz, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, the basic problem is that the video game manufacturers have a big and very effective lobby, the Entertainment Software Alliance. There are some video game consoles that have paired parts. The motherboard and the optical drive, like the disk drive, are paired, and I think, even though increasingly video game consoles don't have disk drives, they're still really reluctant to give up that means of fighting piracy through hardware. So yeah, maybe in a future bill, hopefully in a future bill.
Does it include countertop appliances?
I do not think it does. So your coffee maker, you might be out of luck.
Oh, no. Well, all of you that you have your Keurig machines, maybe go back to the reusable ones. No more K-cups. So, okay. Liv, another question for you. Is there concern that the manufacturers might not comply with the California legislation and the right to repair requirements? And if so, how does the state go about enforcement? And how do we know? Like, this is where my cynicism comes in. Working in the waste industry as long as I have, 16 plus years, and right to repair situations coming on board in many different facets. And how do we know that the manufacturers are not going to be like, yeah, here is how you repair our item, but we are going to super glue the screws into place and make it impossible for you to actually fix the item, even if you have the instructions? Like, how do we control that control by the manufacturers?
Of course, that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on because this doesn't apply to design. The law doesn't regulate how they design your devices. So that is definitely a concern. And right now, the enforcement of the bill is in the hands of California's Attorney General Rob Bonta, and his office has the power to fine manufacturers who choose not to comply with SB 244. And under the bill or under the law, after the third day of noncompliance, the AG's office can fine $5,000 per day, which starts to add up. I was doing a little quick math yesterday, and it, I think, is a little over $1 million a year. And so Liz might be able to speak to the design component and how to regulate or how it might not be possible to regulate that. But something I do want to note is that Attorney General Bonta has expressed public support for the right to repair as a concept, and he's even gone as far as to call on Congress to pass federal right to repair legislation.
And Elizabeth, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, Liv is absolutely right. We haven't regulated design at all in right to repair laws in the US so far, but they are starting to regulate design in some European legislation. And so, I think the combination of laws we're passing here and laws they're passing there together hopefully will make a more fixable 2024.
I think a lot of people are concerned with fixing their own electronics because they've been told that any repairs not done by the manufacturer will result in voiding their warranty of their item. Is this true? And also, in addition to that, under the new law, could manufacturers force consumers to use certified repair shops?
So this idea that repair will void your warranty if you go anywhere but the manufacturer, it's a really common and really dangerous misconception. It has actually been illegal to void a warranty for repair since 1975 because of this law called the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. So Magnuson-Moss says that when you provide a warranty, you can't condition it on requiring your customers to use your own repair services. So still, of course, if you break something while doing a repair, or the independent repair shop you take it to breaks it while doing the repair, the manufacturer can refuse to warranty the particular part that was broken. But they can't just say, oh, you changed the battery, so we're not going to honor the warranty on your screen, or vice versa. But of course, manufacturers aren't exactly eager to correct that misconception, and it is a wide misconception. And a really bonkers amount of manufacturers say somewhere in their documentation that they will void your warranty.
Yes.
That is illegal. And if you find that in a manual somewhere, you can send it to the FTC. The FTC is starting to crack down on this.
Federal Trade Commission.
Yes. And they're starting to find manufacturers who are telling people that independent repair and DIY repair will void a warranty, because it can't. That's illegal.
Fantastic. And for people that don't know, you can easily go online, find the Federal Trade Commission. They also have the Federal Trade Commission green guidelines about, environmental claims, sustainability, environmental, social claims on a product. Those, for a nerd like me, is really interesting to read, and they're upping them they're redoing them right now. Turn them in. turn these false claims in for sure.
So if you see one of those little stickers that says, if you break this, you void your warranty, you can take a picture, send that to the FTC. They can't do that.
Oh, wow. Dang. The amount of stuff the manufacturers are allowed to get away with, even if it is illegal, and most of us believe what we're being told, right? And makes you question everything. Historically, what has been Apple? Our phone, iPads, what has been Apple's position on right to repair? And that's for you, Elizabeth, because I know you deal with this at the national level.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was really sort of surprising about the California bill passing is that we did it with Apple's endorsement. They actually came to the negotiating table with us and came out in support of the bill. And of course, that's big news because they've been fighting right to repair so hard. Last year, they spent over $300,000 in California alone fighting right to repair legislation, easily millions of dollars nationwide across the 30 states where we were fighting for bills. They fought it basically as hard and as long as they can. And they say, their stuff is too dangerous for people to fix. They should be able to control the ecosystem. But meanwhile, they've been preparing to comply. So a couple of years ago, they introduced an independent repair program, allowing independent repair shops to buy parts from them. A lot of shops don't like the agreements. They say they're manipulative, but they're better than nothing. And last year, they started selling parts for some products directly to consumers. So they've been sort of trialing these versions of what they would have to do if right to repair passed. So even while they've been fighting it, they've been getting ready for a world where right to repair is law. And I think they saw it coming down the pike. They came to the negotiating table.
Yeah, because I'm a little bit skeptical. They were so hard against it, not just in California, as you said, but nationally. They've just spent millions and millions of dollars, and now they're like, oh, we'll support this, and they're making it a little bit easier. I mean, this is skeptical. This is making an assumption here, but why do you think they're motivated? If you can answer that, like, why do you think, what's motivating them? I mean, do they just see the writing on the wall? Is there a bigger game plan to inhibit implementation? I mean, do you have thoughts on that?
I think seeing the writing on the wall is a big part of it. Similar laws already passed in New York and Minnesota. They knew that they were going to have to begin to comply with those laws. That's in January for New York and July for Minnesota. And by coming to the negotiating table with us in California, they were able to help us develop a law that they could live with. And that, that law doesn't go exactly as far as we would hope. For instance, it allows Apple to do this parts pairing thing where they.
Oh yes, I wanted to ask Liv
we'll
about
get there.
That. Yeah,
we'll get there. But
next question.
Yeah,
right.
But I still the bill goes farther than any bill has before. And last week in a White House event, Apple came out in support of a nationwide right to repair law. And I think we'll probably disagree with Apple about what exactly that law should look like, but it's great to have them at the negotiating table and great for them to be beyond the position of fighting right to repair tooth and nail.
Oh, and that's the importance of both of your organizations, because just because you have a piece of legislation doesn't mean that piece of legislation isn't milquetoast. It doesn't mean like, oh, we were supported right to repair. We're so great. Look at us. But it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't have any teeth, but we passed it, and so having your two organizations to hold them to the fire to say, yeah, you did X, Y, and Z. We're willing to negotiate on these elements, but we're not willing to let go on these certain things is so incredibly important. Because I am afraid that at a national level, they'll just water down the responsibility, but they'll be really happy at the fact that something was passed and they can put their name on it. And so that brings us to this parts pairing thing that Elizabeth, you had just mentioned. Liv, what is parts pairing? And can you talk about how Apple, as mentioned, required parts pairing to be part of the right to repair legislation? It was a concession in it for this right to repair legislation to pass in California.
Parts pairing is a way for manufacturers to make sure that you're not replacing or swapping out parts of their devices. So what they do is they serialize a part. So it could be the battery or the screen, and they link it to that specific iPhone or, tablet, iPad, whatever you want to call it. So when you do something like try and replace a cracked screen, you have to go through Apple or one of their authorized repair technicians in order for the repair to be deemed successful. So this makes it almost impossible for small repair shops to do necessary device repairs because the phone itself knows the technician is using a part that wasn't originally paired to the phone or isn't an Apple authorized part. And so you'll get a pop-up that doesn't go away or the phone won't update. It just stops working properly. And so when negotiating with Apple, there were several things that, the groups went back and forth on. They wanted parts pairing. We wanted 7 years retroactivity, settled for 3 on most of the big devices over $100. So yeah, it is a negotiation. It is a conversation. And yeah, they do want this bill to be the national model, as Liz mentioned a couple minutes ago. They look at California as something they can live with. They know that this is a movement that's gaining momentum. And when people are calling on them, I think they need something that they can point to say, we supported this, we were at the table, we've had some of our needs met in this, and we can live with this nationally.
Yeah, it becomes their copy and paste, right? And so if other cities or states are trying to pass the legislation, then it's that copy and paste and be like, this is what we're all right with. Where else has right to repair legislation passed or been introduced throughout the United States? And how does that differ from California? Because it has been passed in other states, and it does look kind of drastically different depending on where you're at.
It does.
Liz.
Yeah, right to repair is really gaining a lot of momentum, and those laws have been introduced in over 30 different states, and they've passed in 4 states, California included. Colorado has passed right to repair laws that cover farm equipment, powered wheelchairs and devices, and those have been done as separate bills. The powered wheelchair bill in Colorado was a bipartisan effort that brought both Democrats and Republicans to the table. New York has a right to repair bill, but there were some last minute concessions when it arrived at the governor's desk that weakened it a little bit. And then Minnesota also passed right to repair legislation earlier in the year, I want to say maybe March, April, and that really helped the California law gain momentum. And I think that the Minnesota law is the most similar to the California law because they both have those retroactivity clauses, which does give them some teeth. It's not something that you can kind of kick down the road. It's happening in 8 months. So
and remind us just the retroactivity. You mentioned it at the top of the show, but what's the retroactivity clause?
Of course, yeah. So devices that manufacturers sell for $50 to $99 have 7 years retroactivity. So you can access all the repair things that you need, a part, guide, manual, for devices that go back that far. And then for devices over $100, it is 3 years. So July 1st, 2021, anything that was sold to you between 2021, 2024 going on, and it'll.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. The 7 years is future looking, not the retroactivity is 3 years for everything. The 3 years, 7 years thing is for future looking.
Yeah, so both Minnesota and California have those retroactivity clauses. And then, yeah, California's bill received bipartisan support. There were quite a few more conservative members that voted for it. And earlier in the legislative session, it passed off the Senate floor with 30 of the 40 California senators voting yes. So it's an issue that affects everyone. And you can really see that when it comes to vote counts, when it comes to how many states are introducing that legislation.
And we have a couple minutes before going to the break. So I just wanted to ask Elizabeth, is there anything that you wanted to add in regards to some of the legislation that's happening throughout the United States and how that differs from California?
Yeah, I mean, so I think California's greatest strength is this future looking piece of it, that things will be required to stay on the market. That hasn't happened in other bills. Minnesota's bill is the broadest. It applies to the widest range of things. So it covers basically everything with a chip, with a smaller range of exceptions than the California bill has. But substantially, they're based on the same model legislation from the Repair Association, and the main goal is the same: to make parity between manufacturer authorized shops and independent repair shops, make it possible for people to get the parts, tools, and documentation they need.
And do you think that this is replicable, like what's happening in Minnesota and California, to other states? Do you think it's easy? It could be easy, a copy and paste, to be able to allow other states to push on this and give that opportunity to their consumers?
Definitely. Yeah. Other states are already beginning to think about their similar bills for next session and how to go further even. But I think also in a lot of cases, manufacturers will, in complying with the laws in California and Minnesota and New York, they'll just make materials available to everyone, not just Californians. Apple has already said that they're planning to do this. It makes sense. It's easier than trying to limit, especially things like repair documentation. If you'd have to put it online with a portal that checks people's zip code or something crazy like that. So it's easier to just make materials available for everyone. So this bill it's raised the floor for other states. We can keep asking for more things other places.
That is fantastic. Well, we're going to take a break. Be right back to talk more about right to repair and what's been happening in Europe. What I want to talk about agriculture and how this right to repair, how it applies to agricultural devices and also medical devices, and why this is such an important topic that we should really have a vested interest in, because it's going to affect us or someone that we know. I mean, we all eat and we all unfortunately need medical support. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. We are back talking about right to repair. Before the break, we were speaking to how the California legislation could affect other legislation in different states, how it could be copied and pasted, what's happening in Minnesota. I want to also know because the United States is not the only place that is having to deal with this issue, right? This is a global issue. Europe has passed some specific right to repair. They also have things in the queue that they're working on. So let's focus on what's happening in Europe for a moment as it pertains to right to repair. And not even Europe. If things are happening in other places as well, internationally, let's speak to that as well. How does what's happening internationally, compare to the United States and to California? What are they doing? Liz, if you want to start off the conversation.
Yeah. So Europe has passed some actually really exciting legislation in the right to repair space. And we talked before about how the US hasn't really regulated design. We haven't been telling manufacturers to make more repairable products. We've just been telling them to make repair materials available. Europe is bolder about telling people how to design things. So there are these eco-design directives. There are a whole series of them, and some of them cover right to repair and require manufacturers to make parts, tools, and documentation available. There are design directives currently covering appliances and yard equipment, and they're working on eco-design directives about smartphones and tablets. They also, in Europe, the European Union passed a battery directive that will require manufacturers to design things with user replaceable batteries. So, you have to be able to change the battery yourself. And this is
go figure, right? That's a great one.
Yeah, right. I mean, every adult remembers the time when cell phones had a battery that you could replace with your thumbnail, right? Pop off the back cover, pop the battery out. Sometimes it would fall out when you dropped your phone on the ground. And we've just accepted in the last 10 years that phones don't do that anymore, that phones have a battery sealed in, which is kind of crazy because batteries have a limited cycle count. There's a limited lifespan to a battery before it starts to degrade. And that lifespan is usually somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. And most people want to keep their phones for longer than that, don't want to replace their phone at 18 months. So it's awesome that in 2027, manufacturers are going to be required to make batteries user replaceable, easily changeable by individuals.
In Europe or across
in Europe, yeah. But similarly, we'll see, right, how many manufacturers decide to make a special Europe only replaceable battery version of things. But there's evidence that manufacturers will just comply across the board. And for instance, the European Union also recently required that manufacturers make devices chargeable via USB-C, and manufacturers have started to comply with that around the world. So, Apple has dropped their Lightning port, and the newest version of the iPhone charges via USB-C. So
I thought there was already 10 years ago a piece of legislation passed in the United States, maybe it was California, I don't know, that controlled the type of charging cable we had. Maybe it was on the back, the wall element of the charging cable, but it didn't specifically define the port into the actual device. And so, and I just remember there's being something like that, and then they were able to get around it by changing the port, that the item, that the port directly into the device could be their own thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know about a wall charger legislation that could be the case. There was a voluntary agreement in the EU that almost every manufacturer signed on to charge via USB-C about 10 years ago.
Okay,
and
that might be
almost everybody did it, but one
it was
big
more hopeful.
company. Yeah.
One big company.
Yeah. So that there is other stuff happening in Europe, not European Union wide. France passed a repairability labeling law that's pretty cool. All consumer electronics in France have to have a score rating on how easy they are to fix, a scale of 1 to 10. There's no requirement for a specific score, but consumers are using it to make decisions. So, almost immediately after it passed, Samsung did a survey, and the vast majority of consumers had heard about it. And surprisingly, 80% of consumers said that they were willing to change from their favorite brand to a more repairable one if they saw a better repairability score.
Oh, wow. And Samsung ran that test, ran the survey.
That was a Samsung survey. Yeah.
Wow. And Samsung was like, I got you. Okay, good.
Yeah. So, manufacturers are seeing this, so that they're being pushed to make more repairable stuff, because of this repairability score. They know that it's something that consumers are using to make decisions.
And Liv, is there anything that you wanted to add to the conversation of what's happening internationally?
Internationally, I'm not as well versed. I feel like California is my
yes.
But it is important. Repairability index is important. I would love to see that. I think I might have read this, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, that they put it on the receipt and you just can look at it. I would love to, I don't know, buy something at Best Buy and look at the receipt and know that it's repairable.
Yeah, I think it's at point of sale. So, when you look at like the price tag at a Best Buy or whatever the France equivalent of Best Buy is, next to the price tag, they've got their repairability score.
So one of the things I keep mentioning throughout this whole thing, throughout our conversation today, is the agricultural and the medical right to repair, because it's just blows my mind that we don't have, or that they don't have the ability to have secure right to repair of their own devices right on site when something breaks. And the California Senate Bill 244, the right to repair bill that we've been speaking to, only applies, as we said, to specific types of consumer electronics. It does not include any equipment that is related to agriculture. However, being able to repair on site and quickly without having to contact an approved dealer is extremely important to farmers. Can you explain this further? And I know Colorado passed some legislation that allows farmers to fix their own equipment. Why is it so incredibly important that farmers are able to fix their equipment on site immediately? And what are they being told that they have to do instead?
Yeah. So absolutely. Colorado passed the first ever agricultural right to repair bill this year. And so starting next year, agricultural manufacturers are going to have to begin to make repair materials available. And it's a big deal, of course, not just for farmers, but for anyone who eats, which is all of us, right? We care about agricultural yields being possible, farmers being able to get stuff out of their fields. And if equipment breaks in the field, well, a harvest is happening. Farmers need to be able to fix it right away. And, yields, the crops will start to rot in the fields if they can't harvest them when harvest time happens. So farmers are experiencing a lot of the same problems that, folks are experiencing in consumer electronics, appliances. Manufacturers are restricting repair, and it's worse maybe even in agriculture because John Deere has over 50% of the agricultural equipment market. They've consolidated dealers so that a single dealership chain serves thousands and thousands of acres of farmland. And what that means is that if you need a repair and you're a farmer, you have to call up your dealership chain and get on the repair queue, and that can be days or weeks or even months sometimes, which is totally unacceptable when you've got a crop in your field that's waiting to be harvested. The way that they do this, the sort of technical way that they do it, is that any repair on a Deere tractor that goes through the emissions control unit, which is most repairs, it's a lot of almost all the sensors and so on go through the emissions control unit at some point. So anything that goes through that unit requires a dealer to activate the part, and requires them to send somebody out from the official authorized shop. And this is crazy for farmers who are do-it-yourself kind of people. They're they have the technical skills. They've been working on tractors for their whole lives usually, and it's really incredibly frustrating to them to not be able to fix things themselves, and it has a huge impact. It can be really, really expensive to lose a yield.
Would they say the reason why, if it goes through the emissions control unit, is because now it becomes an environmental quality issue? And so
Exactly.
is that okay? And
Yeah,
is that the case though? I mean, are we looking at environmental quality issues, or is that just an excuse?
the argument is that farmers will soup up their tractors and overclock or whatever the tractor equivalent of that is, and make them emit too many emissions. But I've talked to a lot of farmers. I don't know any of them that are doing that. I know a lot of them that have had broken tractors and not been able to fix them in the field when they've needed to. So it's, if there is an emissions issue, they can control that. That's still illegal to soup up your tractor that way. And there are ways to pursue farmers who are doing that sort of thing, but they shouldn't be blocking repair that way.
And then, Liv, one of the other elements is the medical industry, and not allowing right to repair on site for medical devices. This is not protected currently under the legislation, like to fix wheelchairs or to fix incubators or ventilators. But like I'd love to hear your opinion on the wheelchair situation, because that blew my mind to realize that you could not fix a wheelchair.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it kind of hearing Liz talk about it, it's kind of similar to the agricultural issue because it is pressing. It's repairs that need to happen immediately. So wheelchair right to repair allows people who use powered wheelchairs to fix them when a part breaks. It could be a battery, the joystick. And the holdup is that, same with all right to repair, is that the manufacturer is the only entity that can fix the chair. So that's really limiting. It can create medical emergencies pretty quickly. And wheelchair users have to file a claim with the manufacturer, who puts them on a wait list. So this can be days, weeks, maybe months, for one of their own authorized technicians to come do a site visit and assess the repair that needs to be done. So a lot of times, based on some of the stories I've read, the visit isn't even to conduct a repair, it's to see what needs to be done. Sometimes repair technicians don't come with the right tools, the right parts. And so people are going days, weeks without their powered wheelchairs, which for so many people is a daily necessity and can cause medical emergencies. There are lots of reports of understaffing technicians, not supplying them with the right parts, not training them to know what the right parts are to conduct proper quality repairs. And so there are technicians that can do these repairs, independent technicians that aren't manufacturer authorized, but they aren't allowed to. And a lot of times those technicians, have a shop set up that is closer to people who are on the wait list than the technician that's coming out from or sent by the manufacturer. People in rural areas, it's really hard to get people out there. And if the part's not right or it doesn't fit, then, you're back on the wait list waiting for someone to come back out when maybe you have someone who could fix it in your town or the town over. So it is an issue of dignity, quality of life, powered wheelchairs are really expensive, and they're supposed to last anywhere from 3 to 10 years. We did have legislation introduced. Senator Dodd introduced SB 271, which Californians Against Waste was supportive of, which would have allowed people who use wheelchairs to repair them. However, that was vetoed recently by Governor Newsom due to concerns over, I think, Medi-Cal. I'm not entirely sure what the specifics of those are, but it's something that's not in the bill, still left out. It seems to be needing separate legislation, and yeah, it's a quality of life issue.
Yeah, I think Governor Newsom's veto is because the bill would have gone around the prior authorization system for Medi-Cal, so it would have complicated insurance billing. And a right to repair powered wheelchair bill did pass in Colorado last year, and they got around the insurance billing issue by passing a separate companion bill.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So I'd love to try again with the right to repair powered wheelchair bill in California, and do what we can to address the billing issues.
There's other issues with medical equipment, right? I think listeners might be surprised that hospitals are limited on fixing broken equipment, from baby incubators to ventilators, which was so incredibly important during COVID. When we donate equipment to foreign countries, they're limited since they don't have the resources and the information to fix the equipment. Liz, would you like to speak to this? We have a few minutes before we close this portion of the show, and remind our listeners that we always continue the show over at ecojusticeradio.org. You can find where we're continuing it. But Liz, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, it absolutely. They're, as you said, baby incubators, ventilators, donated equipment. All kinds of medical equipment people are having the same problems trying to fix, and medical equipment manufacturers have similar kinds of monopolies and repair restrictions that keep people from doing those repairs. It's a little bit different in the hospital industry in that, it's not patients or individual consumers that are trying to fix things. It's hospitals' on-site technicians. And, often those folks have the know-how, they have the experience, they've worked on this equipment, they use this equipment all the time, but they don't have the power to make repairs. Either, they can't get parts, or they don't have the information, or, in some cases there are software blocks that keep them from doing repairs. So, we hear about this problem from hospital technicians around the world that are unable to fix the stuff they need. And this was, of course, a particularly big issue during the pandemic, when there was a way higher need for ventilators than we'd ever had before, and people were trying to fix every ventilator they possibly could. And so during the pandemic, iFixit started collecting repair manuals for hospital equipment. We asked any techs that had stuff to start sending us those PDFs. And interestingly, during the pandemic, manufacturers were fine with that, and even sent us some things. But basically, as soon as the state of emergency was over, we started getting takedown notices, and suddenly this life-saving stuff doesn't matter as much. Right?
And we only have a couple minutes to the break, but are they legally allowed to issue a statement to you to say take that down? I mean, they can issue the statement, but
right.
Do they have any legal right to make you take it down?
So far, we have effectively fought all of those takedown notices. So we've worked with our legal friends over at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they've helped us fight those takedown notices.
Great.
So far, so good.
We're going to continue this conversation as we do always, and you can find that continued conversation, listener, at ecojusticeradio.org, because I want to talk about the legality stuff that's happened. Like if anyone's ever been sued for fixing their own electronic, or any, have there been lawsuits from the manufacturers? Have there been lawsuits to the manufacturer? So that's one question I really want to cover in that. But before we end the show today, I want people to be able to find both of your organizations. So Liv, we'll start with you. Where can people keep up with right to repair legislation and actions that are happening so they can take action, and follow y'all's social media accounts for yourself if you like, but definitely for your organization?
Yeah, we are Californians Against Waste on all social media platforms. Our website is CAWRecycles with an S.org, and we're at Californians Against Waste on Instagram and CAW Recycles on X or Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days.
And Elizabeth, where can they find you?
We are iFixit, IFIXIT, on all kinds of things, everything but YouTube. On YouTube, we are iFixit Yourself. I also want to plug the Repair Association, which is the national repair trade association that we've worked really closely with. They are at repair.org, and they have a tool for contacting your legislators. So if you're not in California, if you're in another state that hasn't yet passed right to repair legislation, go to repair.org, find your state, and there's a one-click contact your legislators tool there.
Well, thank you both. This has been an interesting conversation as always. And reminder to our audience, we're going to continue this conversation. So visit our website at ecojusticeradio.org to hear the extended version. Thank you to you both for being here. Welcome back.